Hey guys, how's it going? I'm back here with another video, and in today's video, I'm going to be introducing to you guys one of my favorite frameworks in Node.js, which is also well known, called NestJS. I'll be taking you guys all the way from how to install this framework into your Node.js application and how to actually set up with an example project. I also cherry-picked a couple topics within the framework that I think are important to understand that deviate a little bit from the only beginner stuff, because I want to prepare you guys to build applications with the library. So if you want to check out all of the code we're going to be working on, will be in the description. And yeah, that's pretty much it. This video is not sponsored. However, if you're looking to deploy or host any application, either it be a front end or a back end, I definitely recommend the friends of the channel, Hostinger. I'll put a link for them in the description. If you guys check them out, it could help me as well. So I always want to promote them because they've actually done so much for the channel. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So let's get into the tutorial. Okay, everyone. So first things first, let me just go and give you guys a quick explanation of why you would want to learn NestJS. By the way, it's NestJS, not NextJS. A lot of people get confused between the two, but NestJS is a framework for building scalable Node.js applications. So it is mostly a backend thing, and it is good because, in my opinion, it actually enforces really good coding practices. So you'll see that it basically fully supports TypeScript, and it utilizes elements of object-oriented programming and the MVC programming model in order to write your application. The whole point of the framework is to facilitate developers to build a really scalable Node.js application by solving the problem of how do you architect and structure your application. So you guys will see that after we install it, they have a really nice CLI that actually facilitates creating the whole application for us. So let's get started with that. Okay, everyone. So let's get going with installing the NestJS CLI inside of our computer. So since we're installing a CLI, we have to install it inside of our entire computer. So it's not necessarily for this specific package. So I'm just going to install by using npm i-g, meaning global, and then at nestjs/CLI. I'm going to press enter. It's going to install the package. I've installed it already. So I can test to see if it's installed by running nest and then -v. And you'll see that it shows us the version that is installed in my computer. So if it wasn't in your computer, it wouldn't even show this. So that's how you check. If it's not actually showing up and it says that it couldn't be found as a command, try closing your terminal and then opening it up again. So now that we are here, we need to create a new NestJS project. So in order to do that, we can just use the CLI and say nest new, and then we can put a name for our project. So I'm going to call this book API. Now, as an example for you guys, I'm going to be creating an API, which is a very simple CRUD for book information. It's going to also ask us which package manager we're using. I'm personally using npm in this video, so I'm going to choose npm. It's going to start installing everything. You can see already over here that it's already created a bunch of files for us, but we'll wait while the thing says installation in progress, and I'll be back in a second when it's done. Okay, as you can see, it just finished up, and I can just Command K to clear up all of that. And let's take a look at all the stuff that is new inside of our application. So obviously I created here inside of the book API folder a bunch of files. Now I'll explain what each of these files mean. So the first one that you need to understand is the main.ts file. This is the entry file of your application, and it utilizes the Nest Factory core function to actually create our application. And then it basically tells Node.js to listen to the port 3000, which if you've worked with Node.js in the past, this will actually start our server on the port 3000. We can actually run it If we go to package.json, they already created a bunch of scripts for us. Now, in order to run it, we have to first cd inside of the book API folder, because now we want to be inside of this folder. And inside of here, we'll run npm run start. As you can see, it will run the actual command and create the dist folder, because what happens is we write everything in TypeScript, as you can see by the TS files, but it obviously compiles everything into JavaScript, because that's what is built in the end and served to our computer, right? So as of right now, you can see that our application is indeed running. So we're good enough to start talking about the next few files. So the next one I want to talk about is the app.service.ts. So this is an example for how a service would be created in NestJS. So if you're not familiar with already by how NestJS is organized, basically the idea is you'll have controllers which will handle incoming requests, and they created here with the CLI bootstrapped code, basically created this app.controller.ts as an example for us. The controller will be where we'll be handling all the incoming requests. As an example, here we'll be handling a GET request with a route that is called getHello, just as an example that they made for us. The service is the part of our application where we're going to be handling the data access and will encapsulate any business logic. So in this case over here, you can see the controller is calling the service, and in the service is where we would probably make some requests to get data, handle that data, and then return. And then in the controller, we would either do something with that data, in this case, just return it back, right? Then we have the modules, and the module is basically where we organize the code by grouping related components together. So we'll create a module over here, which is the global module inside of our project. And here is where we list out all the imports, all the controllers, and all the providers, which is all the services. So it's a way for us to get all the different controllers and all the services that we have in our application and just group them together to then pass them into our main.ts and create our Nest application. So as an example for fetching the data in this tutorial, I'm going to be using Insomnia. And if you've never used Insomnia in the past, it basically allows you to test out API requests. There's multiple other services out there that you can use as well. There's Postman that is really famous. You can actually build a front end for this if you want to and just test that out there. But as you can see, our service is running. So if I make a GET request to the localhost 3000, we'll get returning back a simple message or a string saying hello world, which is expected because this is what we're actually doing, right? So now that we have kind of established how we're going to test this and the initial idea of this, I want to just go over, I'm going to delete this over here right off the bat. And I want to also delete this one over here. And we are going to, actually, I might leave them just and we will alter them as we go. So what we want, like I said, is to create a book API. So we're going to imagine that we're working with a database. I'll show you guys exactly where you would make the database calls, but we're going to have a file inside our local system, a JSON file with some data that we're going to manipulate. As you can see over here, I created a file called fake database, and this is just for testing purposes. I'll even link all of this in the description. Basically, I defined the structure of the data we're going to be playing with, which will be a book. And I also created a simple data set for us over here, right? So a book will consist of an ID, a title, an author, and a publication year. And I listed out over here a bunch of examples. Being honest, I got all of them from ChatGPT, but this is what we're going to be playing with in this tutorial. So how would we start generating this API using NestJS? So the first thing we have to do is define our controller, right? So over here, you can see we had the initial controller for everything, right? And I can actually change the name of this controller to actually more properly match the API we're working with. App controller is very generic, right? And it's what they give us, but we're actually going to be working with books. So I'm going to call this book controller, or books controller maybe. Perfect. Now we can actually give a name to this controller that will exist inside of the routes of the API that we call. So for example, when we pass this without putting anything inside of this controller decorative over here, any request to localhost without putting any extension to the URL will work. But if I came over here and I said book, just like that, we would access all the routes inside of here by first making a request to the book, or books actually, extension of the route. So this over here is important because we definitely want to separate our routes based on what controller we're working on. Now that we kind of changed the name of this, I also need to change it on the module because we used to have the app controller. We don't have that anymore. We have the books controller. Now over here, we want to have some routes. Right off the bat, I want to create a route that is basically just going to return to us the list of all the books that we currently have in our database. So we're going to create this function called getAllBooks. And what I want this to return is a list of books. Now, if you look in our fake database over here, we haven't exported this interface. And if you're actually working with MongoDB or with, I don't know, MySQL or any other type of database management system that you're working with, you definitely need to create types and match them to the types that you're going to be working on your controllers, because it's everything using TypeScript, right? So over here, I can very easily say that this endpoint will return a list of books. I just have to import this. So I actually say /fake database, and I'll import the book interface, right? I also just realized I was being stupid. This is how I define the array type. And we can now define that this endpoint will return a list of books. Now, we have this little thing over here at the top, right? Similar to how we had for the controller. And this will help us tell NestJS what type of route this is. Now we're saying that it is a GET request. Now, if we don't put anything inside of here, making a GET request for localhost 3000/books should actually return whatever is inside of here. As an example for now, I'm going to comment out this call for the service because we're going to handle that in a bit. And I will return just the word book, just like this. Oh, I also realized we can't do this, right? I actually changed this to be a string for now, just to show you guys. And I'll return the word book. Now, will this work? Well, no. It says cannot get books because even though we made some changes to our API, we ran our project using npm run start, which actually doesn't refresh the server or restart the server every time we make some changes to the file. If we want that to happen, we have to run npm run start dev. And then every time we make any changes to our file, it will actually restart the server for us. So opening up over here, if I make this request, you'll see that it will return back the word book. And we didn't even have to put any extensions over here, right? But if I wanted to, for example, to get all the books, I wanted to have to come over here and make a request to /books/getAllBooks. I would actually have to be a little bit more specific. And the way I would do this is by putting that specific string over here. So I would say getAllBooks. And then over here, if I run this, it would actually work. But for our purposes, for this endpoint, I actually don't want that. I just want it to be the most standard GET request to the books route. And you can see that it continues to work. So now let's go back to what we actually want, which is to return a list of books. Now, how do we do this? Well, we want to communicate with our service because the service is where it's going to make the call to our database, or in our case, our fake database. So we're going to, instead of make a call to the app service, which exists over here, we're going to change this to the book service because now we're changing the names, right? And since we did that, we also have to change it here to books service and pass it as one of our providers. Now in our app.controller, we have to make a reference to that service. So I'll change this to books service, not services, service. And I'll even change the variable to books service here as well. Now, in order to make a call to the new renamed service, I'll just call this.books service. And you can see it still has the getHello function that comes with our initial project. So let's actually change that. Let's call this getAllBooks and say that it returns a list of books that we'll have to import again from the fake database. Now, over here is where we write the logic, where if you were using MongoDB, you would do some sort of database request, or if you're using MySQL, you would do a query. This is where you call your database, right? In our case, we're just using this file as a fake database, like I said. So what I'm going to return here is just the actual books array. So I'll return books. And since we're returning this on the getAllBooks function of our service, and we're getting that inside of our controller by now saying getAllBooks over here, we are returning from this controller the correct data. You should see that now if I make this request, we get back the list of all the books. Now, you might be thinking, why didn't we just return books over here? Right? We could have easily done this. Causes the same thing. Like it, literally we're just creating extra functions, right, for the same purpose. Well, the reason why we're doing this is because this example is very simple. So in this example, we really didn't have to do any major things on our controller. So inside of the controller, you could handle a lot more stuff. You could handle getting informations about the request, like getting params, getting headers, getting stuff related to the request in itself. You could do stuff like validation of the data that is coming back from the client. You can also return back statuses and error codes, stuff that actually relates to the request in itself. And also, here is where you would handle, or at least call, authentication to see if the user who is making the request is the user that should be making the request. All of the other stuff which is related to data should all be handled in the service. So none of that goes here, all of that goes inside of the controller. Since this thing over here, this endpoint only calls the only purpose of it is just making a request to the database. There's no much added layers to it. It looks kind of like we're just doing this for the purposes of just separating it. But in the long run, this matters because we're abstracting our knowledge and separating our concerns. And it's the main point of how NestJS architecture is defined. Now, let's make some more interesting requests. So the next endpoint that we want to work on is an endpoint that will return to us a single book if we give an ID to it. So it will be a little bit different from the getAllBooks because we're not returning back a list of books, we're only giving back one. And this time we will need to do some stuff and some logic inside of our controller. So let's get going. First of all, it is a GET request, so we have to specify that. Now, since we have another GET request over here, this one will need to be renamed because we can have two requests that have the same name technically. Having no name is having a name when you're working with routes. So since this one is a little bit more specific, I'll give it a name of get by ID. And we can test this by putting get by ID over here. Now I'll save that. And we can start working on the function. So the function will be called getBookById. Now, it is a little bit different because, like I said, we'll be returning a book, but there is layers inside of this parameter over here because we do need to grab the ID from the user in the client. So we are expecting the user to pass in that ID in some way or another. And there's multiple ways you can do that. You can pass IDs through the body, you can pass ID through the headers, but the most common and obvious way of doing it is by using query parameters. So I'm gonna be grabbing a param from this controller. The way I define that is by using the param decorator over here, and I can put a name for that param. I'll call it ID. Now I have to give a type for that ID, for that param, which obviously is a string, but also we have to define how the param will look inside of our route. So we have to actually put the param over here, just like how you would in any other API. Now, if we were to come over here, actually, let's not even test it now because it's not going to work. But if we wanted to make this work, we'd have to put a slash 1 over here, for example. And this is how our actual route API call would look like. Now, we have defined everything for this route, this controller. We just have to write the logic inside of here. Good thing is that it's really easy to get the param from this request. We can create a variable over here called book ID and set it equal to plus ID. And this will basically give us back whatever the user puts as the param over here. And now, since we have access to the book ID, we can return a call to the books service dot, and then we have to create the actual service function for this controller. So let's go over here and let's create the service function. We'll call this find by ID, since this will be the actual one that we'll be calling, and it should return back a book or undefined. Now, the reason why we're putting it as undefined is because possibly this will return undefined if someone is trying to find a book that doesn't exist in the database. So we'll have to account for that. Now, we also can put over here a book ID as an argument to this function, and it will be a number. And we can write some logic inside of here, like fetching the data from the database and passing in the ID. In our case, to actually get this, we'll just say books.find, and then we'll loop through each book, just like this, and we'll return the book, which has the ID equal to the book ID that we passed in the argument of this function. Now, obviously, it can return undefined, and the find function, as you can see from its type, it can return as an undefined. So this should be good. If we come over here and call the find by ID function and pass in the book ID variable. Now, I also have to account that this can be undefined, so I'll put this over here. So perfect. We have this route defined and the service working. So let's try seeing if we can get the to kill a mockingbird book by passing in the ID of 1. It seems like we couldn't. It says that cannot get books / get by ID and then 1. I think the reason for that is because we do have to put a slash over here. As you can see, putting a slash works. Sorry about that. We have to put a slash to separate the name of the route from the params. So now we can see that this could work for any other one of the books. If we change the ID, it will actually return the book relating that ID. Perfect. Now we finished the 2 GET requests that we have. And we can start doing some more data manipulation, like working with a post request. Because a post request is a bit distinctive because it requires some data that we can get from the body of the client. So we'll define a post request over here, and this post request will be called add book. Now, it should return back a book because the whole point of it is the client will call this endpoint, will pass in a book data through the body, and then at the end, if we successfully actually created the book, it should return this. If not, we can handle something like an error message or something like that. So this is perfect. For now, we can just start defining a little bit more of this add book function. For example, if we want to get the body of a request, we have to do something similar to how we did with params. We define a decorator called body, and we'll give it a name. So we'll call it book, and this will be of type book. So from the front end, we're expecting this to have a type of book. Now, we want to be able to generate the ID inside of here. So I'm actually going to say that the type of this is partial book, because in TypeScript, if we don't do this, it will require us to pass object through the body of this request that includes the ID already. But to be honest, we want to generate that ID inside of here automatically. So my expectation is that when we make this request, we're going to send a JSON object, which will include the following things. It will include a title, which, as an example here, let's add the book Harry Potter and the Sorcerer Stone. Let's give an author. It's J.K. Rowling. So J.K. Rowling. Publication year. Let's put, I think it was 1995. I'm not sure. But this is kind of how we want to send the request. So no ID is going to be passed. And obviously over here, let's change this to be a post request. And we're not going to put any specific extensions. We want to just make a post request to the books endpoint, because I would assume that the most generic default endpoint route for books would be to actually just add a book, right? So this is kind of what we want. Obviously for now, it doesn't work. But what we want to do is I want to come over here and I want to get the book body. So I'll say book data equals to the book that we're getting from the body. We don't have to put a plus like we did with the param. With the body, we can just do it like this. Then we want to generate new ID. So there's multiple ways of doing this. I actually, thinking about it right now, I might do this in the service and you guys will see why. So let's actually just return over here this dot book service dot add book. Let's create that function and pass in the book data over here. Now the add book function, like I said, will actually be one of the easiest ones to make. We'll say, actually let's not call it add book. Let's call it create, because we want the service functions and stuff to be very, no, not this, to be very generic to handling data. You know, we might use this, reuse this more than once. So we want to keep it generic to what database operation or data handling operation we are actually executing. So over here, we'll create the function, we'll say create, and this function should return back a book and should take in a book as the argument, which is a partial of the book type. Now inside of here, we want to actually generate the new ID. Now for simple purposes, like you saw from the data, each ID is just 1 plus the last one. So I'm just gonna get the last item in this fake database books array. I'm gonna get the last one. So I'm gonna say books.length -1, and then get the ID from that, and then do a +1. So we're just adding something to the end of that list. So we're just adding a new ID like that. Then we're just gonna say books.push a new book that will be of the format of the book that is sent through the body, plus the ID of it will be equal to the new ID, just like that. And there's an error type because it says that the title, the author, and the publication year is optional. However, we're kind of guaranteeing, we could obviously handle it in multiple ways over here in our controller. This is where we would actually handle, for example, if no book dot author, then return something like an error message. If no book dot, actually I'll make it for all the other ones too. So not book dot title or not book dot publication year. Right? We should return undefined or an error message. I'll put undefined for now, and I'll say that this also returns undefined. for simplicity purposes, because now what this means is that we're kind of guaranteeing over here that the other fields are present. So we can actually say that this will run if we have book.author and book.publication year and book.title. Perfect. Because now we can encapsulate all of that over here and just push that. Because now over here, if we wanted to generate the object, I'll actually create it over here at the top. I'll say const new book equals to an object which has an ID of new ID, like we did below. The author, and I'll actually say that this is a book as well. The author is equal to book.author, and we're kind of guaranteeing that it is true in the controller, but if anything, for TypeScript safety purposes, we'll also default it to an empty string. Then we'll say title, we'll say book.title and default it to an empty string. Then publication year, and we'll do the same. We'll say book.publication year and we'll default it to 0 because it's a number. Now over here, we can just pass in the new book. Perfect. Now you can see the error is gone and we can actually return this book. So we can just say return new book over here and everything should be perfect. And yeah, at the end, we can just change that. So let's try this out now. Let's go and make this a post request. We'll again try to send this data. When we click send, we see that we get back a book similar to the one we just tried to create, the same fields, and with the ID of 11. If you recall, we had 10 items initially. Now we have an item with ID 11, so the ID was correctly generated. Now, how do we actually test to see if our data was manipulated? Let's make a request to books and make a call to the getAllBooks controller endpoint. When I send this, you should see that we have all of our previous books plus the new one that we just added in the end, which is perfect. It means everything is working. So we're pretty much done with our post request. Let's continue rolling and go ahead with our update. So I'll say update over here. Actually, put. It doesn't have to be update. It's a put request. And for the put request, we'll also probably just keep it low key with a sense like we won't put any specific like route names. We do have to grab the way we're gonna change the field, which by the way, the field that we're gonna force this to change is the way we're gonna update this book is by passing in the body, like all the fields we want to change, and an ID for the book that we want to alter. So since we're working with ID, we'll do something similar to what we did over here, and we will work with some params, specifically the ID param. So since this is a put request and we only have one in our controller, I'll just name it the default route. Then over here, I'll call this update book, and it will in the end return back the book that was updated. So we'll say book or undefined. Perfect. Now this will be very similar to this. We'll actually just straight up copy this and put it over here because we do have to grab the ID param. But also on top of that, we also need to get the body. So we'll say body over here, and we'll grab the book of type book. Or in this case, it will be of type partial book as well, because it can be actually any variation of a book. It can be just the title field, it can just be the author field, it can be just a publication field. It can be just one of those fields that we're trying to alter. And perfect. Now we want to return all of this by saying this.bookservice.update. And we want to pass in arguments over here, both the ID and the book. We're going to pass both of them so that our service has both of them to make the query to our database. Now, differently from what we've been doing so far of grabbing the data and destructuring everything immediately, let's actually just pass everything directly to the arguments. Let's assume that this update function we're going to create in the book service is going to have the first argument being the ID and the second one being the book. And then in the book service, we'll actually create it. So I'll say update over here, and I'll say that it returns back a book and it's undefined. And down here, we'll just say that the first argument to this will be the book ID. It will be a number. And the second one will be the updated book. And it will be actually book fields. And it will be a partial of a book. Perfect. So how we're going to structure this is a bit different from what we've been doing so far. We're going to first have to get the current data for that book. So we do need to find the first, the current book. So I'll say const find. I'll just actually copy this books.find, and I'll create a current book equal to books.find and pass in the book ID over here. And this will return back how the book currently is before the update. Now, we also have to define how the book will look after the update. So we'll create an object over here called updated book. And what we're going to do is we're literally going to set this equal to a merge of this object and this one over here. So the merge will basically be, we'll destructure all the updated book fields, because this will be an object with maybe one, maybe two, maybe all three fields that we can have in a book. And we'll just put all of them directly over here. And then whatever is left that is necessary in a book, we can actually destructure from the current book itself. So what this will look like is if the updated book fields, if we pass in just the title, just like this, a new title, as the body to this request, the current book object will be the full book with the title, the author. I won't write everything, but it will have everything over here, right? And then the updated book object that we're creating right now will start off being just an object with a title, which is we're getting from the destructuring of the updated book fields. And then we're going to fill out this object with whatever is left in the current book that isn't in the updated book fields object. So it's actually a very easy way to make this work. And in the end, we can actually just say books.map, because map will replace an item or multiple items inside of this list. We have to just first find the actual item. So I'll say book over here, and I'll just say that if the book.id is equal to the book ID that we're trying to alter, then I just want to turn that into the updated book that we just created. If it is not, so if it's any other book that we don't want to touch, we'll just keep whatever the current value is right now. So we'll return book, just like this. So obviously this is a little bit complicated, but this is just because we're using a fake database array. It will be complicated in itself if you're working with any database system. So now in the end over here, we have updated that thing, and we'll just return back the updated book. Perfect. And this should be working. Let's actually try this out. Let's change this into a put request. And for the ID equal to 11, right? So the J.K. Rowling book, this one that we just added, the Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. I don't know if you guys know, but there's two titles to this book, actually. There's Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, and there's the US version, which is the Philosopher's Stone. Now, imagine I just want to change that. I don't want to change anything else. Well, I can very easily now go ahead and do this, and you'll see that it returns back this information. There might have been an error because this should have returned back the full book. So let's take a look to see if it actually screwed something up. Let's say get over here, and let's take a look to see how this looks in the end. It seems like it's not even here anymore because it doesn't actually match the data format because we actually removed all the other fields. So what I think we can do with this is we can actually change this a bit and say that the updated book will have an ID equal to the book ID. So we'll just define everything immediately. I apologize for the mistake. We'll say ID is equal to book ID. Then for the title, it will be equal to updated book fields.title or the current book.title. So what we're saying here is we'll first try to put whatever is on the updated book fields. If nothing for the title field was passed to that object, then we'll just keep it how it was before. And we'll do the same thing for the other ones. Actually, I think this actually might look easier to understand, and I should have probably done this since the beginning. But as you guys might know, if you've watched my videos, I like leaving on mistakes because it showed you guys how my thought process works and it helps you guys understand better. So I'll put over here publication year and do the same. Close this up. Then publication year and then publication year. Perfect. And now let's test this out again. Let's try to get all the books, right? Perfect. Now let's actually, that example I created completely screwed up. Let's just change Brave New World to Coward New World as an example. The ID is 10, so I'll put 10. And let's change the title to Coward New World. Send. As you can see, it seems to have worked. We get back the same book, full object, with the updated title. Now let's do a get request over here and just get that book. And let's see if the title has updated. It doesn't actually seem to have updated. Now with this current book, I want to create a new updated book. And it will be pretty simple. First of all, the ID of this updated book will be equal to book ID because we're already passing that in the argument of our function. Then the title will be equal to updated book fields dot title. Now, this can be null because we might just pass in the author to update. We might not even pass in the title. So in the case where the title is null in this object, we actually want to default it to whatever the current book has. And we'll do the same thing for all the other fields. We'll do it for author. So we'll put author here and here, and we'll do it for publication year, and we'll do it here and here. Perfect. Now, how do we edit this? How do we actually set the current value to the correct one? Well, first of all, the ID that we have for this book is equal to 1 plus the current index in the array, right? Because this is how we're defining our array. The first item has an index of 0, an ID of 1. So we can actually very easily just alter this array by saying that books at the index equal to the book ID minus 1 is equal to the updated book. And then in the end, we just return back the updated book. Perfect. Now let's test this out. Let's come over here. I have over here an example that I've actually already created. It's we have the list of books, right, that we have in our database. And in the last book, we have Brave New World, right? So I want to change the title to Coward New World. So I would make this into a put request. And I would put the ID of 10, which is the ID of the book, at the param of this route. Then I would pass in an object with just the title field because that's the only thing we want to alter, and with the new value. If I click send, we should see the new book over here. But did it actually alter the list of books? Well, let's find out. Let's change this to a get request, make the request, and as you can see, it did alter. But let's see if we can actually update more than one thing at once. Let's make a put request for books and actually change Fahrenheit 451, which is a book with ID 9, to have a title of Celsius 154, right? And also the author, let's change the author to be, instead of being Ray Bradbury, let's change it to be PedroTech. Couldn't come up with anyone else. Let's see if we can change two fields at once. Seems like it worked. Now let's go to get and actually get all the books. And it seems like it worked as well. Perfect. Our update functionality is working. Let's go to delete. So we're getting actually pretty fast at this because Once you get the hang of it, it becomes way easier. And for the delete, to be honest, it's always the easiest one to work with, other than the get, in my opinion. The delete, honestly, should just return back let me think, it should probably just return back the actual list of books that we have with the deletion. So let's return back a book array as the return from this function. We also need to put the decorator, right? So we say delete. And in order to delete a book, we need the ID of the book we want to delete. So we also have to grab params here. So we'll say ID. And over here, we also have to put the param decorator, and we'll put ID. Perfect. Now, inside of here, let's return this .book service.delete, and assume that we'll have to pass over here the ID as a argument to this function, right? And I also forgot, we also have to put the ID over here and set a value of string so that we get rid of all those errors. Now, inside of here, let's create the delete function. Like I said, it will take in the book ID, which will be a number. And it's actually going to be very simple. We're going to return over here the book array. But the way we're going to do this is, how else would you delete an item in an array with a certain ID? Well, we have the filter function, which exists in JavaScript, which makes everything so easy. We can just say books equal to books.filter. So we'll set the books array equal to a copy of itself, but we'll filter through that copy and delete whatever book has a book ID equal to the book ID that we passed in this argument. But the filter function, basically, it's the opposite. It keeps whatever satisfies this condition. So we want to keep all of them and filter for only those which doesn't have the book ID equal to the book ID of this function, right? And then in the end, we'll just return books. It seems that we cannot assign books because it is an import. So, to be honest, it makes sense. I should have just defined this array instead of the app service because we just can't mutate it. So ignore what I said about the filter. We'll probably have to use the other method, which is splicing based on the index. So the way we would do this is I would probably have to come over here and say array, or books in this case, dot splice, then put the index of the item that we want to remove, right? So the item we want to remove is the book ID -1. Same logic to how we did this over here. And we also want to remove one item, so I'll put 1 over here. And again, let's just return books at the end. This actually looks way simpler. So let's test this out. Let's change this to a delete operation. And let's remove the body. Nothing is necessary. And I want to remove the Celsius 154 book. So I'll put 9 over here, click send, and it seems like it has removed because it returned an array with everything but that specific book. Now this is pretty much it. And it's basically most of what I wanted to teach in this video. I really want to make an extension to this video if you guys are actually interested. I've never made a NestJS video in the past, so I'm just gouging the interest from everyone, where I go over more complicated topics. My thoughts is I can talk about pipes, I can talk about filters, guards, middlewares or interceptors, how to do authentication, all of the kind of stuff, maybe even build a project with NestJS. But this would obviously be out of the scope of a beginner video. The last thing I actually want to show as part of this beginner video is some really simple and helpful commands that we could have used in this tutorial. Like the CLI facilitates. If you notice, we actually created everything inside of the app.service and the app.controller files. I realized we changed the name of the controller and the service to books, but we never actually change the name of the file, right? If we want to generate it very easily, we can just use the CLI. For example, imagine I want to add a part of my project that deals with movies instead of books. I can just straight up come over here and say nest G, which means generate, then specify that I want to generate a controller and give a name of movies. Press enter, and as you can see, it has now generated for us the movies controller. But I realize I'm outside of the actual directory that we should be. I should cd into books API and then run the same command, and you'll see that this will now be created inside of our source folder, right? Now, what if I want to create a service for that? Well, change this to service. And you'll see that it does the same thing. It adds the movies service to this. It puts the name for it. It puts the name for the controller. It does everything automatically. We can even create a module, right? I could actually come over here and change this to module. And you'll see that it will, no, let's not make it flat. I'll press enter over here. And you'll notice that it created the module file for this as well. So like I said, NestJS is really good because it enforces great code standards and abstraction. It actually emphasizes object-oriented programming because we're working with everything in classes and defining our methods in the way that you would in object-oriented programming. And it supports MVC, right? We're separating the concerns of our application, the business logic from the controller logic, from where we view our data, from everything, where we're just putting everything in their specific spot and handling them separately when everything connects in the end, making our project more scalable and easy to implement. So that was the point of the video. I really appreciate if you guys could leave a like and subscribe. Massively appreciate that. Again, check out Hostinger. This video is not sponsored. I'm guaranteeing that. But I really like their service, and I do get some support if you guys check out their link because I've used their service and I've been sponsored by them in the past. So if you guys could check that out, I would massively appreciate it. With that in mind, thank you for watching, and I see you guys next time.